Hello, my loves. Thank you for joining me, Cassandra McAllen, for some thought pain therapy. Today, we're going to be talking about forgiveness. And as I'm teaching, please feel free to ask any questions you may have in the comments below, and I'll get to them after my talk. So, why forgiveness as a topic today in healing? Well, when I began my practice in body-mind medicine, I remember that the first quote I ever learned, which comes from the East, was, "Show me a body wherein lies disease, and I will show you a body wherein lies unforgiveness." I have seen this made manifest in every person I have ever worked on. And if you Google health and forgiveness, you will see a number of corresponding statements. In fact, Johns Hopkins Medicine has a quote on their website that simply states, "Forgiveness, your health depends on it." It goes on to say that studies have found that forgiveness can reap huge rewards for your health, lowering the risk of heart attack, improving cholesterol levels and sleep, reducing pain, blood pressure, levels of anxiety, depression, and stress. So in every facet of the mind, emotions, and body, forgiveness helps us heal. In the field of psychology, there is a dynamic referred to as fundamental attribution error, and it is based on the generalizations that we make about a person's quality of character and or their motivations. It is also referred to as a state versus trait dynamic. And without our awareness, it can lead to numerous reasons why we might be unforgiving of people in our lives. So I will begin this by diving into this somewhat complex theory because I think it holds a subconscious yet substantial grip on our minds, thus our words, then our deeds, and ultimately our health and our lives. So thank you for your patience as we begin, and I assure you that this will make sense and you will be grateful, if somewhat abashed, to learn about it as I was. As simply as possible, state versus trait means that we perceive our own mistakes and errors of judgment or inappropriate social behavior as being due to a particular and unusual state of being at a specific moment in time. However, we tend to attribute the behaviors and errors of others to a characteristic pattern of thinking or a flawed personality trait. Thus, we can excuse our own mistakes and misdeeds while we hold on to those of others, sometimes with an iron fist of unforgiveness. Does this make sense? So, let me give you an example. Let's say that someone cuts you off in a grocery line or on the road. You would think that they're clearly a very rude and inconsiderate person. However, if we were to do the exact same thing and someone pointed out to us, we would explain to them the reason for our behavior was motivated by whatever was going on with us at the time. Certainly not a personality trait of ours. In other words, we were late for work and afraid we'd get a write-up, or we left our kids in the car because we were sure it wouldn't take more than 5 minutes if we did it ourselves, and 30 or more if we brought them in and had to deal with it. Or maybe we didn't think the person in front of us had made up their minds, or all of the above, etc. Thus, our mistakes are excusable, understandable, and if we're given a chance to explain, certainly people would be forgiving. But we don't apply the same mentality to those around us. We generally don't have the cognitive load or brain power to consider a myriad of reasons why someone would be what we perceive as rude to us. It's simply easier to just think of them as rude people. You might have heard the phrase, people only ever consider themselves victors or victims, never villains. I think this is one of the primary reasons why. We don't consider ourselves villains because we have excuses and reasons for everything we do in our life, and thus can often walk away from a confrontation with someone feeling righteous in our anger or our upset. our understanding of the motivations of other people and application of compassionate grace would take far more time and knowledge than we often have. Thus, they are the villains of our story because we attribute our own behavior as due to our current temporary state and theirs to the personality traits they have. State versus trait. But the truth is, we simply don't know the reasoning behind the acts of others, and thus are less likely to find their inconsiderate behaviors forgivable. Now, you may be thinking, okay, perhaps this excuses the woman at the grocery store who cut in line, or the man on the freeway who cut us off, or the rude remark, or the callous disregarding look, or any other small and temporary insult we feel we're subjected to on a daily basis when we have to deal with other people. But does it forgive the larger insults and injuries that we store away in our hearts to bring out and nourish and nurture in our confusion and our pain? No, but it is actually the beginning. When we start looking at everyone around us as people that are suffering for things that we may never know, we begin to feel more compassionate. Maybe that mother that's staring at her phone in a restaurant and letting her children act out is not selfish or uncaring, but rather inwardly processing a deep grief that she's afraid to show them. Maybe that man that throws up a finger or mouths an insult as he cuts us off is terribly afraid that he will not arrive somewhere in time to prevent a perceived emotional tragedy. And our momentary inattention reminds him of other people who seem not to care about the world around them. Let me assure you that whether or not it is clear, everyone you will ever meet is suffering in a way you will never know. We are all desperately afraid of something. We are all grieving something that we can't often even fully acknowledge. We're all distracted by our worries. We're all depressed about the past we cannot change. And we're all afraid of the future we cannot name. We are all reacting out of trauma rather than responding out of rationality more times than we could possibly want to acknowledge. By coming to this awareness, we can stop reacting out of our own victimhood and making others into villains. Instead, we can look around us at those that annoy us as sisters and brothers of courage as they seek to make something matter of their lives, just like us. By shifting our thoughts to compassion, we shift our words, we shift our deeds, we shift our habits, and we change our health and ultimately our lives. And slowly, and often subtly, these small, compassionate forgivenesses of simple, everyday mistakes, well, they become a way of thinking, a way of allowing, and a way of forgiving, a way of life, of looking at every time that we felt ill-used or put upon. These feelings were in fact the result of someone else's trauma or someone else's state of being. Then we can begin to apply this everyday forgiveness to our lives and our past. We stop applying a lens of self-innocence or a caricature of some callous villain to those we feel wounded by. Of course, it doesn't feel natural at first, especially if we have nursed these wounds into reasons. It becomes even harder. And by that I mean, if we've claimed consciously or subconsciously that we are who we are, and generally in ways that we don't like, because of the actions of someone else, well, in those cases, that makes it much harder to forgive. We would have to rewrite at least a part of our story at that point. We would have to give up being a victim and claim our freedom and our independence, because that's the true gift of forgiveness. We get to release them from our minds and our hearts, release them from our reasons and our excuses. And when we begin to let others off the hook of our pain, then next we can begin to forgive ourselves. I'll talk more about that next week. So I'm going to stop a little early today just to see if there's any questions that I can answer. And thank you for joining me for this part 1 of my live on forgiveness. In addition, I have recently created a blog on my website where, starting this year, and I'll even try to maybe go into some of the lives from the years past, or from last year, I will be putting up the live, so you will be able to read it and share it and go over it again if perhaps you don't have time to watch it, but you do have time to read it. So all you need to do is go to www.thoughtpaintherapy.com and look under blog. And if you have any questions, of course you can place them here or you can ask me on my site. So thank you so much, and let's take a look and see if there's any comments that I can answer for you all today. Vicky, so true, right? Thank you. Thank you for watching. Emily, how might these concepts be applied to forgiving self? Yes, very, very good. So I will talk about self-forgiveness and why it's so important next live. So you'll just have to show up next Monday. Forgiving oneself is hard. It's the hardest, right? And oftentimes when we hold unforgiveness against ourselves, that makes us more unforgiving against other people, because it's a state that then becomes a trait, that we judge ourselves incredibly harshly. And when we do so, it's hard not to judge others with that same yardstick. What if you can't let go of anger, Beth asks. That's a powerful question. So the first thing I would do, Beth, is I would challenge you with the statement that you have made. Because remember, our thoughts lead to our words, lead to our deeds, lead to our habits, lead to our lives. So first, I would just start with changing the statement that I can't let go of anger. And I would just add a little caveat to it. And I would say, I'm having a lot of difficulty letting go of anger. And then I would be specific in my own mind about X. Or I might say, I have been able to let go of anger in so many ways at so many times in my life. But boy, I haven't been able to do that yet in regards to X. Simply by doing that, you create a new pathway in your mind that allows for possibility. And then you might think about what I said, state versus trait, and think more about the fact that everyone is suffering and everyone is acting out of trauma. And remember that even though to us, that person who did us wrong seems unforgivable, they're probably not a villain to themselves, right? We very rarely think of any interactions we have with other people and walk away thinking, boy, I was a horrible person. No, we walk away thinking, well, if they wouldn't have pushed me there, I wouldn't have had to say that. So imagine that this person that you can't seem to let go of anger about, imagine that they don't see themselves as villains either. They have forgiveness for what they've said or done in some degree, most likely, because they recognize it was a trait, not a trait. So I know that you are also in the field of psychology, and I know that the question you've asked is a big one that we all struggle with, and I'm sure some of your clients do as well. So thank you for asking it, because an answer for one is an answer for all. Sharon, Thank you. Great thoughts for the new year. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Jan, would you say forgiveness is the same as letting go? Yes, in a great way it is, because it is letting go of that energetic charge that leads to illness and disease from our bodies. There are so many quotes about being unforgiving is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. That sounds pretty harsh, right? But when you think about it, that's what we're doing. Like, oh, God, I'm so mad at them. Oh, I can't believe they did that. I mean, they're not suffering. We are. Or another quote is holding on to unforgiveness is like holding on to a hot coal that we wish to throw at someone that only burns us. It's true, right? One of the hardest things I ever had to do was let go of anger that I held at, get personal here, my ex-husband. He left me for another woman. Well, one of the things I had to do was I had to reframe that statement. Another thing that I had to do was stop giving the energy to him and my anger through my thoughts, and instead reclaim it as mine. And a lot of other things, to be completely honest. But I too have struggled with anger. I suffered abuse as a child. I struggled with anger about that. I was molested. I struggled with anger about that. I mean, we all have our own private, semi-private wounds, right? But I am here to tell you that learning how to release anger for the little things really does encompass more of the big things. And that also lets us off the hook. So thank you for joining me. And yes, Randall said forgiveness is for your benefit, not the person that you forgive. Very well said. We have to forgive for our health, for our pain, so we no longer have attachment to dis-ease. So I will be posting this on YouTube. You can share it with friends, perhaps, that don't have Facebook or aren't in a part of my group. I'll be posting the transcript on my blog, Thought Pain Therapy, and that's also the name of my YouTube channel. So thank you so much. Please, if you go to my YouTube channel, will you subscribe? Because I can't seem to find it, and I've been told that that's due to the fact I have like 9 subscribers. So that would help me a lot, be able to find my own YouTube channel. So as always, take care of yourself for me, and I love you, and I will see you next Monday.